Hi guys, welcome to Minecraft tutorial. Today I'm going to teach you how to add your very own config file to the game. So this is actually relatively simple. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make it so that it auto-generates the file, and also we have our GUI factory for the config. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new package called config, and inside here we're going to add a BOE config. This is when we can store all of our config stuff. So first, I'm going to have a private static configuration config, and I'm just setting this to null for now. We'll initialize this later, and I'm going to first make some methods. So public static void, and it's going to be pre-init, so called in pre-initialization event. Control Shift O to import configuration from the net.minecraft forward configuration. I'm also going to add a public static configuration. Press Control Space there. Configuration, there it is. And I'm going to do get config. Open it up and return config. So we're going to return the config like so. Just so that we can get it. I didn't want to make it so it's public. It's just so we can get it. And there's also a public static void client pre-init. So this is on the client side pre-initialization, which this will just register something later. I'm also going to create a couple more methods. So public static void sync from files. Public static void sync from GUI, and it's public static void sync from fields. Okay, so what we have here is we have our base methods that we're going to be using. One more method that we will be using, but it's private, and it's private static void, and it's sync config, and just open it up. So for now, the sync from files GUI, that just updates the config file, basically just updates everything that we need to update to do the config. So what we're going to do is in our pre-init, we're going to get the config file. So config file is equal to a new file, and what we want to do is do this one here. I think it's the string. We're going to do loader.instance. We're going to get the instance .get config directory, and what we're going to call it is the bit of everything.cfg. So that's our bit of everything config file. And what we're going to do is put config is equal to a new configuration, like so, and we just put in the file, config file, and then we're just going to sync from files, like so. Now, what we're going to have to do is actually get our sync config method. So all of these will run a sync config method. So first of all, we're going to have a boolean load from config file, and another boolean read fields from config, like so. So I'm just going to put in here the correct sync. So sync config, this one is true, like so. This one is sync config. This is false true, and then this one is sync config false. So false, like so. And it's just so that we can utilize this method. So what we can do is if load from config, all we're going to do is config.load, simple as. And what we're going to have to do now is our config is split up into different sections, different categories, and each category has a name. So what we're going to do is have a public static, and it's going to be a final string, and all it is category underscore name underscore blocks. So my category is going to be for blocks, so all the block options, quite simple, and yeah, so each property inside of the category has to be registered. So what we do is we do a property, and what I'm going to do is property machine cooldown basic is equal to config.get, and we need to choose which one's our default value. So there's loads of different options here, and it's just a normal get. You just choose loads of different ones. You can be really specific, but we just want one that is just an integer. So this one here, and we're just going to do category name blocks. The key is machine underscore cooldown underscore basic, and our default value is 100 for this. Control-Shift-O to import property, and then what we need to do is the property, we need to set the language key, and our language key is going to be gui.config. What we're going to do is we're going to put the name of the categories. So our category is blocks, and then I'm just going to do machine underscore cooldown underscore basic. That's our language key. That's for the language file. And I'm just going to also go and set the comment, but I'm going to get a localized comment so it's in the correct language. And all it is gui.config blocks.machine underscore cooldown underscore basic dot comment. So based on where your language is set, it sets the right comment. So we're going to do property dot set, and what we're going to do is we're going to set the minimum value. So it's the int one. The minimum value that it can be is 10. We can't go any lower than 10. And we're going to set the max value, and the maximum value is 200. That's just so it can't be too fast or too slow. Again, I'm going to copy this for my other property. So I'm going to have two properties, and the other property is the advanced one, and so change the basic to advanced, like so, and the min and max value will be the same. Now what we need to do, we need to actually say the order in which these are going to appear in our config file. So what we do is we create a list for the string, and just property order for blocks, and that's equal to a new array list, draw space, and just string in here. You're going to have to Control-Shift-O to import list. And also what we need to do is now go to property order blocks. So that's for our blocks. We're going to add, and I'm going to do the property machine cooldown basic first. So put that name in, then property order blocks dot add, and then it's just the other name. So property advanced dot get name. So that is our order. And we're just going to do config.set category property order blocks, property order blocks. And now what we're going to do is if read field from config, what we're going to do is open this up. Now this is where up here we need to actually create our localized field. So you want a public static, then it's whatever field type it was. So ours is an int, hence it's 100, and this one should actually be 50. We're going to public static int, and I'm just going to call it machine cooldown basic. I'm not going to initialize this, and public static int machine cooldown advanced, like so. Now in read fields, we're going to do machine cooldown basic. The basic one is equal to machine cooldown, the property dot get int. And just got to do this for the advanced one as well. So just change the basic to advanced, and this one is also to advanced. So you just change the get int to like get whatever the type of variable you are receiving. There is also ways to do like a list of different properties. So like if I do property machine dot set, and you can have just a string array as initial values. So you can make it so that it can cycle through a list. We don't need to for this, but I have used this before. Then what we're going to do is going to do machine, the property for the machine, we're going to do dot set. I'm going to set the value of this to the basic. Property for the advanced, you're going to set it to the property for the advanced. Simple as that. And one last thing, if config dot has changed, if it has changed, I'm going to save the config like so. Now there's one more thing we need to do in here, and we need to get our handler for our config so that when we update it in the GUI, it will also save. So we need a public static. I'm going to make it as a new class, and it's just going to be a config event handler class. And you need to subscribe event, because that's a typical event. We're going to do public void on event, open it up, and we're just going to do config changed event dot and on config changed event, and in the at event we're going to just put the priority equal to event priority dot, and it's just normal dot lowest. It's not that, it doesn't need a high priority. And all we're going to do is if event dot get mod id is equal to our mod id, so reference. So if it's our mod, what we're going to do, we're just going to do sync from GUI like so. And now just in the client pre-init method, just need to do Minecraft forge dot event bus dot register, and it's just a new config event handler like so. That will handle our event. So before I forget about this, I need to go into the common and the client proxy. We are going to need to use the pre-init method here. So in the common, we're just going to do BUE config dot and just going to do pre-init, and in this one I need to do in the client proxy I need to do BUE config dot client pre-init. Save both of these, they'll update the client obviously and update it correctly. So that's all of our registering done. Now what we need to do now is actually make our GUI factory. So we need to BUE and it's config GUI factory. This must implement imod GUI factory like so. It's going to make us want to add some methods, I believe, like so. Initialize method isn't going to do anything at all. The main config class, I'm going to leave that there. Runtime GUI categories, we're not going to do anything with, and get handler for, we're not going to do anything with. So what we are going to have though, we're going to actually have our GUI, so public static class BUE config GUI. This must extend a GUI config, extends a GUI config like so. Open it up. It's going to make us want to add a constructor which has the parent screen in. So the parent screen is a GUI screen, parent screen, and if you just go to super, control space, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the parent screen in, and then this one is the config element, so get config element. This is the method we're going to add later. Then this one should just be the mod ID, so reference mod ID, and the rest should be false, and just the main title. So i18n.format. So get a localized version of GUI.config.main_title. Don't need the extra parameters. Now we need to add this get config element method like so, and it is just a private static method. And what we're going to have to do is create a list of iConfig element. We're going to call this list, and this is equal to obviously a new array list like so, and iConfig element. Need to return this list, and we're leaving it static. And all we need to do is list.add, and it's a new dummy category element. And this isn't going to import because we need to actually write the import above. So if you go import net.minecraft forge .fml.config client.config, that's it. Dot, and all it is dummy config element, and it's dot dummy category element like so. That'll import this one correctly down here, and like so. We just need to put the name in, which is a formatted name again. So if we format this to GUI.config.category.blocks, no parameters are needed. The language key is GUI.config.category.blocks, and the custom entry list is category entry blocks, which we'll fill in later. And now we're actually going to fill in that now. That's not going to like us until we add that class. So public static class category entry block. So for each of your categories we need an entry. This extends a category entry, and it is this one, the first one there. I'm going to open this up, and that's obviously going to make us want to add a constructor. So if we just add our constructor, that fills in everything for us. And obviously we need a build child screen method. So inside the build child screen method, we need to just obviously build a child screen. It's a bit obvious. So we're going to get the config. So configuration config equals bue config dot get config. Shift O to import configuration. That one. We're going to get the config element, which is category blocks, and this is equal to a new config element and config.getCategory, and it's just bue config.category name blocks. Like so, we've got the element. We need a list of iConfig element, and we're going to call this properties on screen. So these are the properties that are on the screen, and that's equal to category blocks dot get child elements. And finally we need to get the window title, so window title, and that's just equal to i18n.format, so another formatted title, and it's gui.config.category.blocks, and no parameters at all. And finally, we just need to return a new GUI config. The parent screen is our owning screen. The config elements is properties on screen. This is owning screen dot mod ID. All require client restart is this dot config element dot requires world restart, or and this dot owning screen dot all require world restart, and then the MC restart is practically the same thing. This dot config element dot requires MC restart, or this dot owning screen dot all require MC restart, and then finally it's just a window title, and like so. Now don't forget, we need to actually get the main config class, and that's just BUI config GUI dot class, like so. So that is actually all of our proper config done. I'm just going to head over to the tile entity now, and if we scroll down to here, this is where I update my cooldown. I'm just going to go BOE config dot machine cooldown basic, BOE config, and it's machine cooldown advanced, like so. So that is actually everything to do with our config done, other than the language file. So what we do need to do is, I've already got everything done, like so. I need to just change a couple of things here. So these are all the properties. I'll just make this full screen. Machine underscore cooldown underscore advanced, and basic. And what I've got here is, I've got the main title, so that's the bit of everything configuration. I've got the category for the blocks. I've got the tooltip for the category for the blocks. I'll show you that on the GUI. That's for GUI. We've got the name of the cooldown, and that just sets the name, and then the comment for each of them. Okay, one more thing before we load up the game is, in our bit of everything class, we need to actually say about our GUI factory. So public static final string, and it is just GUI underscore factory, and it's just the location of it. So here it is, get the package, like so, dot, and it's just BOE config GUI factory, like so. And just in a bit of everything class, on the end of here, we need to put GUI factory is equal to reference dot GUI factory, and like so. Should be able to run the game, and everything should now work. Okay, so the game is loaded up, so should be able to check inside here. The config file is now created correctly, which is great. And if we go over to the mods config, bit of everything configuration is there, great. Oh, and you can hover over this and it says blocks, all block settings, and these have the tooltips, so the cooldown for the basic tier of the machine and cooldown for the advanced, which is great. So if we click done, that will refresh our config. We haven't changed anything, but we will in a second. So if we go inside of the test world, we can show you in action the cooldown changing. So if I just go grab ourselves one of our block breakers and get a block, that won't work until we power it. So if I just get a lever, like so, get it powered, that's going to take a while to break. 50 ticks to be 100 ticks to be exact. And if you go to mod options, you can go to the config, blocks, and if we set this to the lowest 10, if we try to set it to 9, you see it remains red. So if we put it as 10, you should see that it breaks really quick. And we can see that working in action. which is great. And also you can go back to the config blocks and click this one here, which is reset to default. And like so, and it'll break it really slow again. So, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I am out.